This week, we get started on the fourth of Jack Kirby's Fourth World series, Mr. Miracle. Is it more of the same insanity we saw in the other three books? First, if you appreciate the work we do on Deconstructing Comics and our other podcasts, we'd love it if you'd support the show at patreon.com/deconcomics for as little as $2 a month. Check out our goals and rewards and pledge your support now at patreon.com/deconcomics. This is Tim.
This is Emmet.
And this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics. This is Tim in Tokyo with Emmet in Australia. How are you?
Did you briefly forget who I was?
I'm all distracted today because I'm having computer problems, and I'm hoping we don't have technical difficulties recording this episode.
Well, Tim, it wouldn't be a podcast if there weren't technical difficulties during an episode. It's almost like a genre trope of podcasts.
Yeah, somehow my brother and I managed to get up to the Bat Poles recorded last night without incident, but this thing has crashed twice this morning already, so I'm nervous. So we are back with Fourth World discussion, the first 6 issues of Mr. Miracle, who is a super escape artist. And I think this was my favorite reading of this Fourth World stuff so far. I really enjoyed this.
Interesting. Interesting.
It has such an energy to it and kind of a humorous feel. And 2 things came to mind to compare it to. One was Mike Allred's Madman, and the other, of all things, was Al Cap's Lil Abner comic strip.
Oh, okay.
It kept reminding me of that somehow.
Interesting. Now, I'll just quickly interject to say this is going to be interesting because this, of all of the Kirby stuff we reviewed for this series, this is the one I had the most difficulty with.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and perhaps it's a frame of reference thing. My understanding was that, Mr. Miracle, he's sort of, it's Stranko, isn't it? The idea of somebody who Kirby admired as well, like a magician / escape artist. Bit of Houdini in there too, and he dresses up as a superhero. I've always been aware of that's what Mr. Miracle's deal is. But I kind of felt as if at times some of the conventions of those different genres were in conflict. So the superhero, the escape artist story, and then the weird space apocalyptic cult story, and all these things are happening at the same time. And I felt it hadn't fused together correctly until like Big Bard arrives. Things immensely improve once Big Bard arrives, and then Funky Flashman. I can't wait to talk about.
Right. Yeah, I felt like we keep. The storylines in these 6 issues are basically a cycle of somebody from Apocalypse who serves Darkseid is coming to Earth to try to capture or kill Scott Free, who is Mr. Miracle, and they'll put him in some kind of a death trap, which he escapes from, which is like Batman 66 on steroids. It's like this, such an over-the-top trap, and he'll escape from it, and then later he'll explain how he got out of it. It feels a little bit like a murder mystery.
Yeah, and like a magician revealing his tricks kind of thing as well. And it's always down to his superior technology.
Yeah.
Which, works within the escape artist story, because a lot of the times they were little devices they had secret on their person, like a lockpick or whatever. But, this idea of, he actually had something on him to help them accomplish this feat. In Mr. Miracle's case, it's a mobile AI. But, yeah. Or a multifunctional device that, one of my favorite issues in this run that we're going to talk about is the paranoid pill, I think it's the issue. But yes, the thing he uses in that It just turns out it just works for everything. It's like Doctor Who's sonic screwdriver. The Doctor's sonic screwdriver. Sorry, I don't want any Whovians writing angry letters to us. It's the Doctor. Okay.
Yeah, Paranoid Pill is issues 3 and 4, and Dr. Bedlam, he's at the top floor of the skyscraper with Mr. Miracle, and he says you have to try to get out of this building alive, and like the windows are all blocked, and he drops this paranoid pill in the ventilation system, and all the people in the building go kind of stark raving bonkers, and they're really paranoid. They see Scott and they think that he's some kind of a devil or various things that they think they need to kill him. And they, at the end of the issue, they put him in a trunk, tied up, and then chain it shut and throw it down a stairwell from, did you notice at the end of the issue it's the 45th floor, and then in the next issue now it's been 50 floors that it's falling from, that suddenly changes. But yeah, I was really like, I got to know what happens next. This series was really pulling me forward in a way that the others weren't. I really want to see what happens next.
With every Fourth World book that we've talked about, the first 1 or 2 issues, I find Kirby's introducing these concepts, and he's having to sort of lean on the tropes that already exist within this publishing company's lot. Mm-hmm. But he's got all these really crazy ideas he wants to get to.
Yeah.
But he's sort of putting paid to those things first, and then he's getting to the crazy stuff. And I think maybe the response I had to this is because I felt like it took a little bit longer for him to get to the interesting stuff with Mr. Miracle, whereas in For Her People number 2, mm-hmm. Big Bear is having this chat about communications theory on the second page. I'm going, yeah, I'm in. Thank you. Let's go. Jimmy Olsen was just weird. New Gods get stuck in with Orion pretty quickly. This is what I mean. I was a little discomforted by the fact that we were moving from one kind of genre to another kind of genre, but the Paranoid Pill was great. Mm-hmm. It's really good. It was a really great concept, and I was going to say this for later, but seeing as you've touched on the nature of the trap itself, the whole building is trap. Mm-hmm. There is this debate, Tim. I don't know if you're familiar with it, among film Twitter, particularly film Twitter. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's a real world debate. Between who ripped off who, The Raid or Dread. Right? So these are 2 movies where a policeman is trapped in a building and has to fight his entire way up the building through all these goons to get to the boss. Okay, The Raid came out first, so obviously that's why everyone's saying The Raid ripped off. But Dread, there is a panel in this. The panel where Mr. Miracle is dropping, it looks just like the scene from Dread where, spoiler character, I won't say their name, gets thrown off a balcony. And time slows down because there's this whole thing in Dread about time. Highly recommend everyone watch that movie. You haven't watched Dread. It's quite underrated. But I did wonder when I was reading this, Alex Garland wrote and directed, or unofficially directed Dread. He's a comic book guy. I did wonder, and Dread is a comic movie. I did wonder if he'd read The Paranoid Pill. There are bits in it I was like, oh, this looks like it. So I don't think Garland necessarily ripped off but maybe he ripped off Jack Kirby. This is my contribution to the film Twitter debate.
Okay. The story also has this concept of animates, so multiple figures controlled by a single mind, and they come in through a boom tube, and one of them takes on the consciousness of Dr. Bedlam and his appearance, and otherwise they're just these kind of white, pure white dolls with no characteristics. And then at some point in this, just before after he drops the paranoid pill in the ventilation system, then his consciousness leaves that animate and it goes back to being this faceless doll.
Yeah, I wonder if that was like a homunculi. Basically, is it Goethe's Faust, where he's got the idea of the homunculi? But maybe, I wonder if that's what that was. There is a bit later on, we're jumping all around the place, I know, but there's a bit later on where Kirby directly makes fun of Stan Lee via the proxy of Funky Flashman.
Right, that's issue 6.
Stan Lee's propensity for overt literary references. And I'm conscious that, I did make the attempt to draw a line between that New Gods issue and the Odyssey and Odysseus and the Sirens, and now I'm throwing in Goethe's Faust, and so, like, it could be just Kirby came up with this stuff. I'm not like, but I do feel if he were to make a literary reference, he wouldn't call attention to it, whereas Lee would. Lee would make sure you knew he knew this, whereas Kirby just uses the concept. Maybe he'll have read something, he'll have seen something, he'll have heard something, and he'll just take it and put it in. He won't, like, give you a sort of master's degree citation on how knowledgeable he is, whereas I think Lee is a bit of an intellectual chip on his shoulder.
Yeah, well, the take on Lee there, I mean, it's so obvious and it's so sharp. He starts out looking, bald, and then he puts on a shaggy wig and sticks on a beard. Of course, Stan Lee famously grew his hair out and grew a beard. And he's so kind of stuck on himself, and he listens to audio of himself giving speeches where he's saying, okay, and I, like I always say, and how about this gem or something? And as he's, talking up his own quotations of himself.
Yeah, and he's trying to make himself look like a sort of with it hippie. Yeah, it's actually my favorite issue of the run. I think the Paranoid Pill is such an action piece. It's great. Whereas the Funky Flashman thing, it has that satirical edge that I've actually enjoyed in some of the other Fourth World stuff we've seen, but it's solely directed at Stanley. Really enjoying it. It's a savage takedown, and again, we know that Kirby eventually felt bad about it. Like, he felt like he'd gone too far. That's just shows he has some moral character. But I think it's perfectly executed as a takedown of this person who, put him through the ringer a couple of times.
Yeah. There's an unseen character called Colonel Mockingbird who Funky works for. I was thinking that might be Martin Goodman.
That's a good call.
And at one point late in the story, I think it's in the narration, Funky is called the last scion of the departed Mockingbird slave-owning empire.
Oh, wow.
Who were the slaves? Perhaps artists?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mentioned the literary references. There is a nod to Waiting for Godot, as well, and it's just so awkwardly put in the story. I did think it was a deliberate sort of mocking reference, not an astute one, more a sort of here's an incongruous literary reference that has nothing to do with what's actually happening. But the person's letting you know they're smart. They've read Beckett, Yeah, I really enjoyed that one. And just because I think we do dip and dive as we go, but when you mentioned Dr. Bedlam, and we've been comparing Lee and Kirby's approach to dialogue a lot in these, sort of, because we're trying. Here's this guy who's got these concepts. He's finally able to do what he wants to do, more or less. We don't know what sort of editorial pressure is on him specifically, but he is attempting to recreate some of that Marvel Age voice, and he just can't do it. He doesn't have that aptitude. Dr. Bedlam dialogue. Here on Earth, by the simple act of lifting this primitive instrument men call a telephone, I shall begin the little charade I have planned. Oh, this is amazing. It's amazing. And, it's just him portentously lifting a telephone. It's so bad. It's so bad. I did wonder if potentially he could have, Kirby could have instead introduced a mother box that mimicked a telephone, and then, there could have been some, we would have seen it as, how he's foreseen the use of the mobile telephone. It would have been another work of prophecy on Kirby's part, but no, it's literally an old dial telephone. It's an amazing panel too.
Yeah, the cover blurbs. I thought I'd put one in my notes, but the cover blurbs are so wordy sometimes. Well, let's see. Issue 2. We've got 3 questions at the top. What is a follower? Ever wear arrow discs? Who is Overlord? Just a few questions on his road to sudden death. Electric tension means Mr. Miracle, super escape artist. Also, meet Granny Goodness. She reaches out of this world to make deadly little things like the X-Pit. So that's all on one cover.
Here's the next one. It's a simple trap. A 50-story building with doors, windows, exits, and people. Can he leave it alive? Dr. Bedlam tests Mr. Miracle, super escape artist. Between him and escape are 5,000 raving maniacs. Buy it, but don't swallow it. The paranoid pill. It's beautiful. Like, it's beautiful. It is. You know, the inverse of show don't tell. It's amazing to watch him try to catch the attention. And like what's killing me is the cover art for issue 3 is gorgeous. Like it's so intriguing. He could have just had the paranoid pill, like in big letters at the bottom. That would have been perfect.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's a shame. It occurs to me as well, just looking at the dates on these covers, we are reviewing these issues 51 years. It's the 51 year anniversary of Mr. Miracle. So it was March 1971, if I'm correct.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of nice. Bringing him home.
The one that I had in my notes is the cover number 5. It's a diabolical car wash. It traps you on the way in and kills you on the way out. It's mechanized murder. That's a little bit more succinct than some of the others. But issue 5 had my favorite panel of anything in here. The villain is this Dr. Vermin Wunderbar, who he has kidnapped Big Barda. We haven't really talked about her yet. And he says he'll spare her if Miracle Man submits to the death trap, and he's encased in what's referred to as a coffer, and going through this, on this conveyor belt, and into what is it at the end, fire or acid or something, and so Wunderbar and his men are celebrating the death of Mr. Miracle, and standing right behind them is Mr. Miracle with his arms folded and a big smile on his face, looking like he just belongs there, or like he's celebrating his own death. I just loved that panel. I was laughing for half a minute.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. It's great. They're all big grins on their faces, and he's just like he's joining in with them,
I felt like it kind of works because the reader gets surprised before Dr. Wunderbar gets surprised.
Yeah,
like,
it's a nice bit of comedy.
What's he doing there?
Yeah. What's going on? Oh, what are you guys laughing at? Oh, wow. And then he explains how he got out of the trip.
Yeah,
the trap brother. Yeah, no. Do you want to talk about Big Barda? Because
yeah.
It is just so much fun in terms of she's introduced as this threatening figure. She's dressed in the armor of one of Apocalypse's soldiers, the Furies, for Granny Goodness. She Oberon immediately takes a dislike to her. Oh, we haven't even mentioned Oberon. Oberon is sort of this psychic that Mr. Miracle has inherited from the previous Mr. Miracle, an Earth escape artist. Anyway. So she's there, and he assumes she's another agent of Apocalypse there to kill Mr. Miracle. Yada, yada, yada. Everything works out fine. They're all friends. He knows her. He vouches for her. And she leaves the room, and then she returns in a bathing suit costume, which she wears into the... And, again, I keep thinking of what an artist today would do. This would be a major page. But it's just 2 panels on a 4-panel page. One of those panels is exposition dump for the next issue, and when we get to the next issue 5, it opens with like Big Barda doing exercises on a park, and all these people like ogling her. Like Kirby knows exactly what he's doing. He's like, look at this fine woman, look at her. My goodness, she's beautiful.
Coming up, is there meaning embedded in the idea of a super escape artist? And more. Last weekend on our Patreon page, my brother Paul and I discussed the time that King Tut was introduced into the regular DC universe. Nunzio De Filippis and Christina Weir wrote a King Tut story for Batman Confidential in 2009. This Tut is nothing like Victor Buono, and yet the story pays homage to the 1966 Batman TV series in subtle ways. And coming up on Patreon, our rotating cast looks at the artist transition on The Amazing Spider-Man from Steve Ditko to John Romita. These bonus full-length podcasts are available for a monthly donation of just $4. Come join the fun by supporting us at patreon.com/deconcomics.
Greetings from Wayne Manor Memoirs, a podcast dedicated to exploring the Batman mythos.
Each episode, we research a character, story, contributor, or piece of pop culture related or adjacent to the Dark Knight,
And try to understand why these topics are important to the Bat mythos. I'm Joe.
I'm Kendall, and some of our favorite topics include the transformation of Mr. Zero into Mr. Freeze,
The early appearances of the Riddler,
Booster Gold,
Commandi,
Jim Aparo,
and many, many more. Check out Wayne Manor Memoirs every other Friday, wherever you download your podcasts.
and follow us at Wayne Manor Memoirs on Facebook or at W Memoirs on Twitter.
Until next time, Bat Fanatics, be brave.
And stay bold.
So I sent you an article this week that I'll put in the show notes. I want to talk about it more in our next Fourth World episode, but this was on forward.com, a Jewish website written by Roy Schwartz, about how much the Fourth World reflects Kirby's Jewishness. Yes. And it mentions that Big Barda was inspired by both Jewish singer and actress Lainey Kazan and Kirby's own wife, Roz.
Yes, so that's what I had heard. I heard it was Roz. Yeah, but I hadn't heard of the singer.
Yeah, I don't know who that is even, but yeah, I'm wondering what aspects of her are Roz.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, like, how they physically match. Like, Scott Free, Mr. Miracle, is somewhat diminutive. He's more of a trickster. He's more of a... I feel as if Oberon and Scott Free together are Kirby. You know, Scott Free is Kirby's imagined self, and an Oberon is a sort of put upon experience of Kirby in the workplace. You know, he's puffing his way through every cigar he can get his hands on. He's basically miserable. You know, and all these things he can't understand, these forces in his life that are beyond his control are sort of pushing him here and there. I mean, Scott Free is the sort of self-image, the idealized self-image. But either way, next to Big Barda, they are smaller. And I feel that's a testament to Kirby's feelings for his wife, and also how she sort of defended him. She protected him. She was... all the stuff we read about Kirby and Lee, there was... Roz is the one who would interject and go, "You're not going to work for that dickhead again." Like, no, you're not doing that again. And yeah, I found a photo years ago of young Kirby and Roz, and it's like, wow, power couple, you know. It's a very striking photo. Let's just say that.
Okay. By the way, his name being Scott Free, I was surprised that, you know, there are many cases in fiction of people with, you know, characters with kind of names that are supposed to tell us something about them. I was surprised that on a couple of occasions in these 6 issues, there's actually a comment on that. You know, somebody asks him about it. In the first issue, he says, "I was raised in an orphanage, and many of the foundlings were given such names to sort of, well, make them feel as individuals." And then in issue 5, he says, "I'm sure you've read Dickens' Oliver Twist. The kids in that situation had such names. Artful Dodger, Oliver himself." So I kind of liked that they actually acknowledge, this is a weird name, and how did he end up with this name? It's not only because the creator wanted him to have a name that told us something about him, but he kind of explains it within the universe.
Yeah. Yeah, and also, again, like, in this series, the, like, backups are quite impressive, like what Kirby introduces as backup material. Really does broaden out the world, but in this case, it's actually giving us more insight into Scott Free.
In issues 5 and 6.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed those, and again, this is where I'm kind of frustrated, because I kind of feel like perhaps that is the natural start of the story. Perhaps that's where we should have begun Mr. Miracle. Not to backseat driver this stuff, but like I kind of feel as if that's such an interesting, fascinating arc for Scott. But instead we had he arrives on Earth and he's just some guy just walks up to see an escape artist do this deadly stunt with his psychic Oberon, and then the mob arrive and he defeats the mobsters, but the old man dies and he takes over his role. Also, he's an alien.
Yeah, and Metron shows up in that backup story. So I was interested in seeing him show up here after seeing him in the New Gods.
Right, but that's because that's what New Gods sort of hinted at, that, or what Metron was hinting at, that he's fully aware that Scott Free is Highfather's son.
Okay.
Scott doesn't know, but Metron knows. And Highfather's like telling him, "Shut up." the entire like piece is dependent on people not knowing that we've done a hostage exchange of our sons. Shut up, Metron.
But yeah, so Oberon, you mentioned he's this kind of pretty short guy who was the assistant of the previous Mr. Miracle, who gets killed shortly after meeting Scott, and then Scott takes over the act. He's not it's weird because it's not necessarily a superhero, but it kind of feels like a superhero comic because he's getting out of death traps and fighting bad guys.
Yes, and when I was a kid, I remember, I'd read some of these UK reprints of American comics. And what they would do is they would have like a page explainer, like DC's Who's Who kind of thing. I think they probably were republished from those in some of these annuals. And one of them was, I think the issue was about Justice League International, because Mr. Miracle and Oberon are in that, the Giffen and DeMatteis run. But they had an explainer as to who Mr. Miracle was. And most of the explainer was about him replacing this escape artist.
Okay.
At least that's the bit that sticks in the memory. And I remember reading that going, oh, okay. And then there was mention, also he's a space god. I was like, whoa. That feels like more pertinent information. But yes, this is what I was saying to you before. You have the costumed character who's an escape artist and magician, and so Scott takes over this identity to fight evil mobsters, one of whom has a metal hand, and I think he's called Steel Hand.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And, again, looking at the character, I was going, I genuinely hope somebody else has done something with Steel Hand. I should apologize again. A couple of times in these discussions, I've said, oh, why aren't people doing this story? Why aren't people doing this story? And there have been Forever People series in the last 10 years. I don't know if anyone read them, but they were produced. They were out there. I think Dan Didio was a big champion of Kirby when he was with DC, so he was trying to get OMAC and things like that out there. I think he personally worked on OMAC. So like people have been using these concepts. It just hasn't impinged on me. So I apologize for my ignorance. But yeah, Steel Hand, I wonder if somebody's done something with Steel Hand, because he's such a wacky dude. Like, and we go from the crime drama to superhero drama, and then later on there's the hints of actually Scott has this highly advanced technology. There's a story behind that. But the issue too, we've got Granny Goodness. straight away. So he got stuck into that pretty quickly.
Yeah, we kind of get into the pattern of the series right almost from the beginning there. But yeah, I feel like it just kept getting better as he kept going through this type of story every time. But yeah, Oberon, I mean, why Oberon? Because Oberon is the king of the fairies.
Yes, Shakespeare. Yeah.
Yeah, I've looked it up, like medieval literature or in Midsummer Night's Dream.
Midsummer Night's Dream, yeah.
So why did Kirby give him that name? Is it because he's short, like a fairy, or...
And Flunky Flashman calls him Elfin later on as well, which, again, I think is intended to be Kirby poking fun of Stanley's proxy here getting the reference and calling attention to the fact that he gets the reference, much in the way that we just did. So potentially that's what's going on there. In terms of a comment on his size, I don't know. Oberon, King of the Fairies, King of Fantasy, if you like, illusion. He's a magician's assistant. He knows how the original Mr. Miracle did all his stunts. Maybe there's something there. You know, it's a name that suggests fantasy and illusion, sleight of hand, things like that. But yeah, I don't know if I could speculate much further unless Kirby's commented on himself as to why he chose that name.
Yeah,
because Scott Free is such a groan-worthy pun for an escape artist, and then you got Oberon, which is like, oh, someone has an English degree. You know, and like there's humor in here too. Like, again, I think Kirby knew exactly what he was doing with that sort of transition of Big Barda from threatening warrior woman to Russ Mayer, Bikini Babe. And I make that reference very deliberately because there's a line, I'm not so bad, a little rough maybe, but once you get to know me, I can be a real pussycat. Immediately my mind goes to Faster Pussycat Kill Kill. Potentially also a source of inspiration in terms of big, strong, intimidating women, very well endowed, and scaring the crap out of men. Because Rosmera knew what he liked.
So we've talked a lot about how often the dialogue in the Fourth World is not well written, and I couldn't help thinking of that in the fourth issue when he's trying to escape from the building that the paranoid pill has been unleashed in, and on one of the floors they're shooting dramas. There's a paranoid director and actors there, and Scott thinks the dialogue is terrible, but they mean every word of it. I wondered if it almost felt like he was poking fun at himself there.
Yeah, I think he's quite self-aware. I think he knows what he's doing. The dialogue is terrible. The demeanor, I don't like my part. Men, just give my apologies to the king. I don't like my part. Yeah, I think he knows his shortcomings, and he's probably received some direct feedback in terms of, you know, we got Kirby. This is working for DC. We got Kirby. Why aren't we getting books the same way Marvel got when they had Kirby? And they said, well, you don't have Stan Lee.
Yeah.
So potentially he's had some criticism. But like it's such a fun idea. It's such a fun idea. So like this, I assume the film studio in this apartment building was already set up, and then the paranoid pill flooded the airways, and all of a sudden they started taking themselves a little too seriously. But yeah, it's such a strange sequence, but it's so brilliant. It's so much fun. A bit of gothic in there.
Yeah, the actors are dressed in kind of medieval costumes and speaking kind of, you know, what's supposed to be medieval English.
Yeah, like had Kirby watched like Witchfinder General that weekend of Vincent Price or something? Because you know, there's elements of that here, or that kind of a production. I don't want to specifically try and force my frame of reference onto Kirby, but I do think, as I said before, he just sort of gloms onto whatever is around him, and you know, there was a trend of medieval gothic horror films coming out of the UK, out of Hollywood, out of Italy. Mario Bava was doing some stuff in this space too, and I wonder if that's something he just happened to catch that weekend. He's like, oh yeah, I might as well put that in. Because it's so, again, it's incongruous. It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, but it's a lot of fun, so who cares? It's a building full of paranoid people that an evil space psychologist set up. We can do whatever we want.
Now, I kept wondering, so, in particularly Forever People and New Gods, we saw a lot of meaning embedded in it and a lot of symbolism, and I was trying to think, like, being a super escape artist, is that meant to symbolize something?
Right.
I mean, why did Kirby come up with this idea? I feel like he must have had something he was trying to say here, besides making fun of Stan Lee.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think I've seen other people force Mr. Miracle into an allegorical reference to Jesus Christ. Again, why do they keep trying to make all these Jewish creators' works Christian? I'm looking at you, Zack Snyder. I've seen the Tom King series that Kumar and I talked about, was a meditation on suicide and suicidal ideation, and so he's trying to escape life, and in Final Crisis, Grant Morrison, Mr. Miracle, well, it wasn't Scott, it was Shiloh Norman, who is his successor. Shiloh was almost trying to escape sanity. There was it's all about whether he's mad. I don't think any of those really work. And I think I got close to it before when we were talking about the contrast between Big Barda and Oberon and Scott, and whether Scott is just the ability of the imagination to set you free from the drudgery of ordinary life. And I think that's what it is. I think it's Kirby's creations allow him to dream big, and then he's got to return to this mundane world where he has to pay the bills and support his family. I think that's what it's about.
Okay, interesting. So his own kind of escaping from everyday life by working on comics.
Yeah, or how comics allow him to sort of treat of or even give you a sample of what his imagination where it's bringing him, but isn't quite enough. But it's a taste of what is going on in the head of his. And then Apocalypse, the Land of Apocalypse, is like the real world telling him that his dreams are worthless and it doesn't matter, and you're just meat in the room, and you are just like everybody else. You don't matter, and that's what Scott Free ultimately rebels from. He looks like everybody else. He bald. Uniformed, he's a drone, and he rejects that. He doesn't know he's Highfather's son as well. I think that's really important. He doesn't know. He just innately refuses to go along with this.
Yeah, I mean, that's not even mentioned. We don't even know that in these first 6 issues.
Yeah. And so I wonder if does that feel apt to you? Does that feel like something?
It works.
Yeah.
Hard to know what was in his mind, but that works as a possible explanation. But yeah, I think so. Jimmy Olsen, I was kind of like, what's going on? This is crazy. Forever People, we saw the serious meaning to a lot of what was in that. New Gods, I was back to this is just too much crammed into here. But yeah, this one was just fun to read, I thought.
Yeah, I'm glad. Yeah, I'm glad you got that out of it. Like I said, it wasn't until the Paranoid Pill and then the Funky Flashman stuff that I was like, oh, this is great. I'm really loving this. I think for me, it found a while to find its feet.
Yeah, the first 2 issues are a little bumpy.
Yeah. But and then once you get the Big Barda stuff as well, just that frisson of sex in the proceedings, just I love it because it's you don't get that with these other people in that same in the same time. They're so dry. Whereas Kirby's yeah, let's get it out there.
Well, that Beautiful Dreamer is dressed a little skimpily, but nobody really comments on it.
Although, when she is trapped in the sort of Happy Land case, she's this beautiful woman. She doesn't look like Beautiful Dreamer. She's another woman. And all these men are ogling her and trying to... Or are they trying to free her from the case? Or they're trying to get to her?
Right, I think they were supposed to like have an opportunity to try to wake her up, or I can't remember quite now, but...
Sleeping Beauty, again, that's where I keep thinking it's a reference to Disney. But that seemed to be a comment on like what society would, the box they're trying to force her into. And she, meanwhile, is just being visited by all these horrors in terms of experiencing this literal locked-in body syndrome, and also she's psychic, so she can like see all of this. These impressions are like pounding on her. It was quite horrifying, actually. That was a really disturbing sequence. The whole Happy Land stuff really upset me. I thought it was brilliant, but like I was like, oh my god, this is a lot. I think, and women characters in the Fourth World stuff are interesting because, you know, you've got the Furies as well in the Funky Flashman issue. One of whom casually mentions that she's Desaad's sister. That's a whole thing. But I feel as if, like Kirby's interested in the idea of women being strong and dominant. And, you know, Big Barda is a positive version of that. And then the female Furies and Granny Goodness are, you know, how that's been twisted into something evil. And I find that, like, he's having an interesting debate here. The same issue also has Funky Flashman mocking Barda for women's lib. Like, there's a commentary on that too. Like, oh, yeah, you're just one of these women who likes to speak up. So I think, okay, if I can go on a limb here, I think Kirby loves women. He loves women, but then there's this tension within the culture he's in where there are men in his peer group or in his industry who really can't understand why they have to acknowledge women at all beyond these set models, like Beautiful Dreamer stuck in the box. Why are you speaking to me? Get back in your box. And that seems to be maybe a thread running through these series as well, because the women characters are really interesting. Jimmy Olsen less so. It's more of a boy's own adventure. With one or two exceptions. Some of the characters, like that lady in Scotland, who's a bit of a double agent. But like in New Gods, in Forever People, and in Mr. Miracle, there are women characters who are quite interesting. I'm curious as to... I want to read more, and I want to maybe do a little reading on this. I have approached somebody for an interview. Maybe we'll get them on the show, but like their work was all about Kirby and women and the figure of the mother and the maternal role in the Fourth World, and you know, refusing it or embracing it, or the idea of women characters having to take on the maternal role. And this person wrote about it in a way I found very interesting. So I'd be curious to learn more. We've touched on Funky quite a lot. How did you feel about finally meeting House Roy? Because we've heard a lot about House Roy.
Right. So he's supposed to be Roy Thomas. And
yes.
He's Funky Flashman's butler, who, you know, when Funky's in danger, he just tosses House Roy into the fray and gets out of there. Which is, really revealing about Funky. And, House Roy kind of kisses up to him a lot. It's not a nice take on Roy Thomas either. Kind of, you know, he's just facilitating this and, letting himself be used and abused.
Oh, wow. I'm looking at the panel where, he's just tossed Roy at the Furies. He smashed his way through a window. The building explodes. The house explodes. He does seem regretful that House Roy was in there when it blew up. Like, he does express
a little bit.
But it seems to me more that House Roy provided a function within the house. And because then he goes on to say, there it goes. Everything. up in flames, the Mockingbird estate, and its happy memories, mint juleps, cotillions, happy slaves singing for the family, and my mind immediately went to that Marvel radio thing they had to do.
Oh, interesting.
Remember? When they all had to sing?
Yeah, and Ditko refused to participate.
Yes. And Kirby was sort of gamely going along with it.
Recorded the record. That's what it was.
Yeah.
The record for the fan club.
That's it, the Marvel fan club. That's what that makes me think of.
Yeah.
I'm not comfortable with anybody comparing themselves to slaves. Like, generally, slaves should be the only people who can compared to slaves. I don't think it's, you had a job. But they were exploited. Their labor was exploited, and they were used, and he took credit for their work. I think that's all fine. We need another analogy. Can't just keep saying slaves.
By the way, that women's lib reference you mentioned early in issue 5, when Scott is taking delivery of that Civil War cannon, and the workmen are trying to figure out how to get it off the flatbed truck, and she just pushes them all aside. I put that panel on Twitter yesterday, and she's carrying it off by herself with one hand. And one of the guys says, "This women's lib thing is getting more serious than I thought."
Yeah, it's like, he knows what he's doing. Kirby, like, he knows what he's doing. Yeah, he's commenting on a lot of the conversation he's probably hearing around the office. I'm sure of it. But yeah, all the alliteration in Funky Flashman's dialogue as well. It's so savage.
Yes. By the way, I had a question this week if we were going to be doing any more Stan Lee bios.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know, I'd like to hear from more listeners about it. I have like 4 more on the list, but I was starting to feel like that we were getting diminishing returns as we got more into the hagiographic material.
Yeah, I feel as well that, as we've just been doing in this conversation, I think watching some of the Stan Lee influence in action, in terms of the story output, and we can comment on that. We can draw back to the stuff we've already read. I think that's interesting. But yeah, sure, if people want to, I'd happily read more. But I think we covered the spread in terms of the different takes on Lee. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we got some fairly to very negative takes, and then we got a few, Stan Lee is God takes, or I am God takes.
Yeah.
But and the remaining ones seem to be more, not written by Stan Lee, but written, adoringly, probably.
Yeah, authorized. So,
yeah, I don't know how much more there is to say about that, but we could take a look if people really want it. I see you sent me that photo you were talking about of Jack and Roz, and just looking at her, I can kind of see the Big Barda resemblance.
Yeah, I found that panel as well with the Funky Flashman commenting on it. So Big Barda, she's spinning the pistol in her hand, and she goes, "If you've come to see Scott Free, mister, just keep your thoughts on Scott Free." and Flashman replies, "Oh, that's good, chickie. That's good. Women's lib dialogue and Bonnie Parker talent. Great, chickie. Great act." And he's like clapping, and like, it's so creepy. Chickie. Oh my god. And then he says, "But I can't use you. Perhaps you can audition for me again sometime when you acquire more class."
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, it's awful. And she immediately intimidates the shit out of him. But yeah, no, I think as far as like, I would be maybe interested in discussing. I saw a book during the week I was interested in, specifically about the rivalry between DC and Marvel, and we can talk about this off the recording. But I would be interested in sort of the wider context of Marvel as an entity, and Stan Lee's role within it as a sort of driving force, and then as a icon if you like.
Yeah, that sounds more interesting to me than reading another Stan book, but
because we've hit the limit of he said, she said. I think.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
yeah,
it's just he was great, he sucked. Round we go.
Yeah,
but yeah, like I don't know, how has this conversation influenced your view of these issues? As far as you came in very enthusiastic, I came in a bit dour.
Well, I mean, I'm still enthusiastic. My
Great.
thought hasn't changed. How about you?
You've influenced me.
Okay.
Definitely. I'm looking at it a little friendlier. I think what I'm enjoying as well about this series is that these are not disposable stories. You always see the work on the page.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's the art or whether it's the concepts, there is effort being put in here.
Oh, yeah.
You know, this is Kirby always trying to say something. I don't necessarily always get what he's trying to say, and there's a certain cultural distance between what I would understand to be heroic images or, you know, topics of interest and what he would, because he's coming with his cultural background and I'm coming with my cultural background. So sometimes I'm missing the appeal of, in this instance, the escape artist. You know, I haven't grown up with all the stories about escape artists. But I understand that there were a lot, particularly the sort of influence in the Houdini era. Mm-hmm. So I can see where that's coming from. But yeah, I respect him so much. Mm-hmm. So if he's doing something, I'm always interested in why he's doing it.
Yeah.
But yeah, as I said, like once Big Barda enters the proceedings, this just escalates into something of quality.
Mr. Miracle is published by DC. Check the show notes for links to the Forward.com article on how Kirby's Jewishness is reflected in the Fourth World, and the photo Emmet found of Jack and Roz Kirby. You can help the Deconstructing Comics family of podcasts by joining us on Patreon at patreon.com/deconcomics. And go to deconstructingcomics.com to connect to us on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube, to shop on Amazon to support the show, and to find links to subscribe to the podcast. Our theme is by J.B. Anderton. If you're looking for some constructive feedback on your comic, send it to us and we'll critique it on our spin-off podcast, Critiquing Comics. Send it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We'll read at least 30 pages of it and critique it on the show. Next week, a break from the Fourth World as Kumar and Emmet discuss horror novelist Nancy Collins' 1990s work on Swamp Thing. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.